so in terms of scale, that's what's happening. And then most recently with the acquisition of NBC Universal, we're really at the intersection of technology and media. And so we're managing a whole host of cable networks. We've got broadcast NBC, and then with Universal Pictures and Parks, we're doing all the things in the movie business as well. So what I'm going to do is walk through some advice. I'll go through 6 areas of advice, and I'll tell some stories about some things that have happened to me over the course of my career that may be helpful for you. So to start, some frequently heard comments. You may be trying to apply Lean Startup at your own company, and you may say that, well, where I'm at, nobody believes in it, so I'm stuck. You know, what do I do if my boss or the CEO doesn't believe in it? It's a commonly heard term. You may be facing this one, which is your team is booked on roadmap projects. You've got plans that go out through 2014, and you don't have any time. You've got things you've committed to your board as part of your strategy, and there's just no time to innovate. And then next, you may be able to use Lean Startup on one particular project, or you just applied it. Maybe you told people about it, maybe you didn't, maybe you just did it. But they're having trouble scaling beyond that particular project, or beyond projects that maybe you yourself control as part of your team. And one of my assumptions is that the room here, we've got a variety of places of knowledge where we're starting around Lean. I'm assuming you have a basic understanding, that you've read Eric's book, and I'll talk about some other resources that, if I don't cover in the talk, maybe you can follow up with after the talk. All right, so I'm going to start with a story. And this goes back to some days where I was at eBay, and at the time, a few years ago, I was running user experience design there for the company. And we had just set the stage. This is 2008. We had just let go of the entire mobile team because they had built a whole bunch of apps for BlackBerry and Symbian, and it just wasn't panning out. And the executive team says, this mobile thing, just not going anywhere, and we've got to really focus on the core business. We've got to shore up our website. We've got competition coming in from Amazon, and we can't be distracted by mobile. So either let those people go or shift them over to other projects. This just happened, right? Well, in the meantime, Apple, they had announced, not part of the initial iPhone, but this is the second announcement, that they were going to be opening an app store. And they had actually approached some people at eBay that were still there and asked, look, we'd love to have you be a part of the initial app store. We think eBay would be a great example of use of a native application. Would you like to help? And so a few of us there, some of these people, Alan Lewis, Ken Sun, Carlin Neal, myself, we looked at this and said, wow, this is a huge opportunity. And it is big in hindsight looking back, but then, it wasn't as clear a picture. And we said, look, this looks really important. But the exec team just let everybody go, like there's no mobile team. So what are we going to do about this? And what we decided to do was, at that time, my design team was big enough that I said, Carlin, why don't you go work on this for a few months? I'll get your work taken care of by other designers. We won't tell anybody. Let's keep this kind of under wraps. The other folks did the same. So for a couple months, we worked on this. We collaborated with Apple. They got a lot of good support and came up with a prototype. Looked great. Apple was thrilled. They said, look, this app is awesome. We'd love to feature this as part of the keynote at WWDC in June. And so we're like, okay, better come clean with management. They're probably going to be watching. So we did. And when they saw it, they began to believe, and they saw how excited Apple was as this being something important. And so they allowed us to go forward and present there at WWDC. And, the rest is history. This application was a huge hit. It was one of the most popular applications in that app store when it launched. And it did two things. One is it actually reshaped eBay and helped them realize, this being an MVP, simplicity can be really powerful. And a lot of those trends carried forth to the website. And now there's a lot of people talking about mobile first. And a lot of that came from these days of the mobile app really showing how simple eBay could be again. It had gotten fairly complicated over the years. But the other was it created a $6 billion business for eBay in terms of mobile revenue. And so, and I'm not going to claim credit for all of that, but we started it. And I think it was taking that risk as a middle manager, and something that many of you can do in your own big companies, that you don't have to ask for permission. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. because the reality is you won't always get that permission, and you've got to do what you think is right for the company. So fast forwarding to where I am now at Comcast, just down the road, this didn't start as a center as nice as it is, and we've got over 200 people there now. This really started out of an acquisition that Comcast made in a small company called Claxo in the Valley. And as part of that, they acquired a lot of great talent and really wanted to bring a lot of that Silicon Valley know-how to Comcast. That there was a recognition, even as you go back 5-6 years, that the TV business was going to be really influenced by software, and that the internet and mobile and these things were really important to how people were going to want to interact and consume TV. And so rather than let that all happen and not be a part of it, they wanted to help drive it. And so a lot of the people there have helped shape taking that TV experience, putting it in the cloud, and putting it on mobile devices. And so, but it didn't just happen overnight. It really helped by building this credibility through projects. And so it started with us working on little projects at Claxo, which at that point, it wasn't named in the earnings calls. Claxo was not something that really made a difference as far as big Comcast. And yet, through those small projects, where not very many people were paying attention, we were able to show that, hey, these techniques work. We applied a lot of the principles that we talked about here at this conference of getting early customer feedback and really learning from rate-based metrics and getting to that MVP early. And so by doing that, we were able to build a lot of credibility with executives. And so over time, we scaled those resources. And over time, we started working more on projects that mattered to Comcast. And most recently, my team played a key role in an important partnership that we made with Twitter in launching a new product called See It, where you take a conversation that happens about TV on Twitter, and in a couple taps, you're able to tune your TV or watch it on your iPad. And that product, was just a conversation this summer. And it was a lot of those lean startup principles that we applied in terms of we want to try and quickly get to something that we can launch and get out in front of customers, and now we're learning from it. Now we're seeing the data flow in. And even before we launched, there were several important pivots that we made to how the product was architected to better fit in the many partners, whether those be other TV providers or other cable networks, to be a part of that. So next, when you're looking at what your innovation center works on, I think it's important to not just swing for those home runs. You're going to see a lot of really interesting ideas come across your desk. You'll say, oh, we should really go into this space, and put all your eggs into that basket. And I think what we've learned is you want to do that for some, but that should be part of the broader portfolio, part of something that you do that on some, but on others, you go for that base hit, you go for that double. So that at the end of the year, when you're looking at what your center has achieved, you know that there are some in there that you've been able to help the business deliver something. And so the way we've looked at it is much the way of VC, we look at funding. And funding, in our case, is really putting resources on a project. Often it's not dollars, it's I'm going to put 4 or 5 engineers on this project. And so it starts with ideation, which this is really a Parkland plan. People are just coming up with this on their own. We run a number of hack days where every other week, for a day, we let engineers figure out what they want to work on. Once a quarter, we'll do it for a week. And so those are self-directed projects. But at the end result is, what we want to do is evaluate that before we go to more formally putting resources on a project. We make them fill out a lean canvas, much like Ash Moira has propagated. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So that's what it starts at that stage, and then we'll seed that with a small team of 3 or 4 people for a couple months, and we'll set some clear targets as to what's the hypothesis that you're trying to prove, what's the metric that you're trying to exceed. And if that goes well, we might move into an MVP stage, where we'll work on that for 3 months, say, and that's what might be termed as Series A funding. And then that might go further. That might be successful, and we might decide to scale that at the center. And that's essentially a Series B funding. But all the while, we're thinking about acquisition. And in our case, acquisition means an existing business unit or a new business unit at the company takes ownership of this project and drives it forward, and we recoup those resources and work on new ideas. So that's how we look at it is we'll narrow the number of projects with time, the number of resources will expand to fill the better ideas, and then we're always looking to exit at some point. So next up is the Lean Canvas. And so we took Ash Moira's Lean Canvas, and as part of that, added one important cell, and we modified two. So it looks fairly similar to what he's defined, where you're understanding what your customer's problem is, and then you're moving forward, creating a solution, defining your unique value proposition, understanding what channels you're going to distribute it, etc. But in this bottom row, especially these two, it didn't fit quite as well. So for cost, often it's not dollars. In a large company, it's headcount, typically. And so it's important that we manage those resources very effectively, and that's in terms of how many people for how long. And revenue, to use Comcast as an example, we are unlikely to introduce a new product that is going to itself generate new revenue. Sometimes that happens, but in many cases what we're doing is we are actually, through a feature or through a new product, enhancing a subscription service that someone may already have with Comcast. And so as such, we're going to maybe improve retention, or we're going to make our product more attractive, and we're going to improve our acquisition of new customers. And our product will play a role in that, but it won't be the only thing that did that. So what's important there is we have some way of measuring how we impacted that larger metric for Comcast. And then lastly, strategic fit. So as you forecast out on that last slide that we had here, you're getting to the end of the game where, look, we can't scale it any further at our center out here in California. We want to find an executive sponsor at the very beginning of our process that's going to be open to this idea, that likes this idea, that can champion it among others at the company. So that's really important. And as part of that, it's important that you fit within some broader corporate strategy. So there may be ideas that you can build a Lean Canvas for that are great businesses, but just not ones that my company would be interested in being in. So it's important that I recognize where that is. And it doesn't have to be right in the core. It could be some adjacent business. But you can imagine there are many businesses Comcast wouldn't be interested in going into. So I need to figure out how, a given engineer's idea, for instance, might fit within that broader scheme. So, as you do that, there are these antibodies, okay? And so, just like in your body, it's built to attack foreign objects. The corporation will do that as well. Many of you, I hear some laughing, may have experienced that. And so that's, for the most part, a good thing. It helps keep the body healthy and helps get rid of things that might harm it. But by definition, everything you're doing is going to be foreign. You're going about it in a different way. You're maybe approaching a business space that is controversial or cannibalistic to other businesses in your area. And so you're going to be stepping on toes. And you're going to be doing things people aren't accustomed to. And they're going to reject that, right? They're not going to reject it because it's a bad idea, but it's not something that we do. And so it's important that you be aware of that, and that you understand where that's going to be coming from. And so as part of that, you want to understand how to avoid presenting yourself as a larger target. So resources are one of those. And what's important is your resources that you've allocated to a given project, you don't want to scale those up too fast, because that will make you a larger target at the company. Because the reality is that at a big company, resourcing is a zero-sum game, right? You can occasionally get funding separate from the CTO, but often if you have funding, it means someone else does it. And if you want to get funding for your project, the best way would be to get funding from some other project. And so keeping yourself right-sized to the given project will help avoid some of that. The other is making sure that you have those executive sponsors that can help defend you, and why we think it's so important to get those up front. They will look out for you, and they will help you be aware of where you might be stepping on people's toes. Because you don't want to just avoid that altogether. You'll get into the innovator's dilemma or whatnot. The other area around antibodies has to do with Vanity Metrics. And so I controversially will say this, that there is a place and a role for Vanity Metrics. And as part of that, you really want to understand those rate-based metrics that you have, those retention rates that we talk about so often in Lean Startup. That will help you figure out, is your product working? Do you have product market fit? Are the new features you introduced making a difference? You want those, you need those. It's the only way to run a product. But that doesn't mean that you need to open up the show all of the other people in the company that may or may not understand those metrics, or may not even have them for their own products. You don't want to just do that, because that exposes you to those attacks. And as part of that, you may be comparing yourself to another product in the company that doesn't have retention metrics. And so when you say, oh, well, we have a 30% customer retention rate after 6 months, you might look at that and say, wow, that's so much better than it was before, or the previous product was. They might say, well, geez, where did the other 70% go? We should really can that project and go fund my project, because I think it's probably doing better. I have no data, but they might say that. And so it's important that you create a level playing field when you're comparing yourself to other projects within the company, and recognize that you want to be able to be compared in the most favorable light against those other products. So in those settings, use the vanity metrics, but just don't believe them yourself. Know why and how you're using those. So to summarize, 6 rules of advice for running an innovation center. Ask for forgiveness, not permission, especially when starting up. This is going to be important that you defend and go after those resources. Second, build credibility for your projects and then look to scale. So don't just go and say, hey, we should go do this big thing and we should fund 100 people. Do it on a few projects. Show how well it works and show how quickly you can get to successful products. Don't put all your eggs into one basket and don't swing for those home runs. Fourth, you need to take Ash's Lean Canvas. It's a great tool, and it's very simple to fill out in 30 minutes, but adapt it to your company. Figure out how to get it to fit in so that it aligns with your strategy and that it fits your kind of planning model. Fifth, look out for those covert antibodies, so just be sensitive to that and recognize where those threats might come. It's not that people are bad in the company, but it's just the way organizations work. And then sixth, use those vanity metrics sparingly, but in those situations where you need to, and make sure that your product is fairly being compared to other ones in the company. And so, love to hear more about stories where you've applied this at other companies. It's something that we keep trying to get better at Comcast. Feel free to follow me on Twitter or on my website, and we'll be sure to post the slides after the talk. And I'll be here afterwards if anyone has any questions.
Sure.